All right, everyone. So the next session was by Dr. Willett, who is a doctor of public health and a medical doctor at this Harvard School of Public Health. And he basically had this study, this presentation about, how diet's hurting us and also how our diet is hurting the planet and how we can't really have healthy people without a healthy planet, right? So he was part of this Lancet study group where they had like 30 different scientists from all over the world kind of look at the health and environmental impacts of different diets and figure out what diet is healthiest for us and for the planet. And as it turns out, that's not that health of the planet and our health are not at odds to each other. As it turns out, the diet that is healthiest for us turns out to be healthiest for the planet as well. So this is him again looking at the similar to the previous presentation, looking at obesity rates in America. So in 1970s, obesity rates were around 30%. Actually, around 1999, it was about 30%. In 1970, it was down here at like under 10%. Then it shot up to 30%, and it's climbed to about 42%. And it's probably higher now. This was 2018. 2022, I'm guessing we're headed close to 50% obesity. And then now there's a severe obesity which is even, worse, and that's climbing up. So our severe obesity rate now is higher than our obesity rate in the 1970s. So it's a bad thing. Cancer deaths have been going down due to better treatment. You can see heart disease has kind of plateaued and is starting to head up. You can see colon and rectal cancer, which are obesity related and dietary related, usually related to not enough fiber consumption. You can see that kind of got good until 1950s, and then it's getting worse again. And if you look at this annual life trends at birth. So a child that was born in the 1960s had this amount of expected lifespan, but now you can see with the United States, we're kind of low compared to the other ones. Japan's doing the best. You can see now a baby born now has less life expectancy than a baby that was born like 10 years ago. And the same thing is happening in women. And then if you look at the BMI trends, so how fat are we getting? You can see the United States, we're the winners. Japan is the losers in the race of being the fattest, so that means they're doing the best at not getting fat. The men are continuously getting a little fatter, so from 1975 to 2015. And then so Japan's getting slightly worse, and then France is a little flatter. The United States is winning. We're the winners. In terms of on the women's side, Japan actually they're getting thinner. France and Italy are fairly stable, and then Germany, UK, Canada, and the United States they're heading up. And then you get into this death spiral where basically as you gain weight, you don't want to exercise and you want to eat bad food, and then you just gain more weight, then you want to exercise less and eat more bad food, and just kind of goes around in circles. That's terrible. Then he's talking about how, we talked about this in our channel, about how basically COVID deaths disproportionately affect certain ethnic groups, and those ethnic groups have higher rates of obesity and vitamin D deficiency. What's happening here is that we basically are trending in this direction where we eat more trans fats and more refined sugars and more refined starches, when what we should be eating is unsaturated fats and whole grains and complex carbohydrates. All right, so this was the commission, the EatLancet Commission, that they looked at what is good for our planet. So basically, we can't continue to eat the way we are if we go, because eventually we're going to hit a global population in excess of 10 billion people, and you just can't feed 10 billion people the way that we are now, because we'll run out of land, we'll run out of water, and we'll basically drive up CO2 emissions to an unsustainable rate. So this is his graph about the average global temperature, and this was measured by 4 different entities: NASA, the United Kingdom, the National Oceanic Organization, and then Berkeley Earth. And you can see they all pretty much agree with each other. And you can see that this was relatively stable until about 1975, and then just kind of, we're taking off. So that's not it's not a good thing. All right, so polyunsaturated fats is what you want. Saturated fats is generally not what you want, so you want a higher ratio. So what has the best ratio for major protein sources? You can see that beef is the worst. Chicken is kind of a little bit better. Salmon is better than that. But then all of these are pretty bad when you compare them to plant sources. Almonds, tofu, lentils, way better than these three. Um, And this is the effect of red meat on cholesterol levels by randomized controlled trials. And you can see that if you use, if they have a lot of animal protein, then it's bad. And then the usual diet, people eat wide varieties of food, so the error bar is huge. But if you use plant proteins, yes, it's your cholesterol is much better. Okay, so this is a meta-analysis of 66 randomized trials looking at risk factors for cardiometabolic disease. These are things like LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL cholesterol. I don't know what FG is. Hemoglobin A1C. This is a marker of how much glycemic index you can do. C-reactive protein, those kinds of things. So basically, if nuts are good for you, so basically these are good for you, these are bad for you. So this is nuts, legumes, grains, those are good. Fish, pretty good. Fruits and vegetables, good. Refined grains, not so good. Red meat, not so good. Eggs, not so good. Dairy, not so good. This is sugar sweetened beverages. Okay, those are terrible. Like, no one should be drinking this stuff. This is like fruit juice, um, sodas, Gatorade, boba tea, that kind of stuff. All right, so this is differences in all-cause mortality. So you look at what dying from anything, cancer, emphysema, diabetes, heart disease, whatever. Um, Looking at what is, if you have more of these protein sources. So if you eat processed meat, that's the worst. That's horrible. And processed meat is like bologna, salami, pepperoni, hot dogs, that kind of stuff. So processed meats, bacon, that's all processed meats. Those are terrible. Those have been listed as carcinogens by the World Health Organization, similar to smoking. Then there's eggs, so eggs not great. Then unprocessed meat, so not as bad. Fish actually helps you a little bit. Poultry, not so bad. Plants, yeah, they're the best. Yeah, it's pretty clear. Red meat and total mortality in the National Health Service. So you can see as you intake more meat, you're more likely to die. And then this is an interesting study where they show that we think of diabetes as a sugar induced disease process, but if you look at meat consumption and the risk of type 2 diabetes, as you increase meat consumption, risk of diabetes goes up. Um, all right, so let's see. So conclusion on red meat and health. The weight of evidence from randomized studies of red meat and cardiovascular risk factors in combination with long-term epidemiologic studies strongly supports that replacing red meat with plant and modest amounts of fish, poultry, and dairy will reduce the risk of coronary heart disease. This is just basically what the EatLancet study figured out. Um, we'll kind of bottom line it for you. It's basically a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruits, a lot of whole grains and beans, and not much of other things. So this is what they say your plate should look like in terms of what you're going to eat. It's like half of it should be vegetables and fruits, then little less than a quarter whole grains and some starchy vegetables. This little sliver of dairy food, this little sliver of animal source protein, that's like eggs, poultry, fish. They have a little picture of a cow here, but they don't want you to eat any red meat. Like should be almost nothing. And then plant source protein is like beans, basically beans, tofu, seitan, tempeh, that kind of stuff. Then this little wedge is plant oils, olive oil and such, and a little sliver of sugar. Okay, this is what they recommend. So you can look at this plate and see what the normal plate looks like. A normal plate is like half of it is meat, and the other half of it is some kind of there's like a few vegetables, a little sliver of a vegetable like garnish, a little bit of broccoli maybe, and then there's a bunch of processed carbs like mashed potatoes or something. So it's kind of the opposite. You got to flip the plate over. It's got to have a lot of vegetables, tiny piece of meat if you're going to have one, um, and mostly whole grains, beans, and some plant oils. All right. Also, he talked a little about sodium. Daily sodium that people should take in is about 2,000 milligrams. The average American does almost double that. Um, you can get around that a little bit by just sweating a lot. So if you exercise vigorously and you sweat a lot, you may be able to get away with a little more sodium. But basically, we all eat a little too much sodium too. This is where he talked about the amount of meat in the traditional Mediterranean diet. This is Greek men living in Crete in the 1960s. That's what the Mediterranean studies are based on. They ate, if you add up all the red meat and poultry, chicken, turkey, that kind of stuff they ate, they average 35 grams a day. 35 grams is about a little over an ounce. So they're eating a little over an ounce of red meat or poultry per day, which essentially means they're eating chicken or meat about once a week, because no one's sitting and eating like a 1 ounce steak or a 1 ounce piece of chicken. What they're doing is they're mostly eating beans and grains and olive oil and fruits and vegetables, and then about once a week they're having some red meat or poultry. Uh, Mostly poultry. The other days they're getting most of their protein from beans and sometimes some seafood, a little bit of seafood, not much. And what that shows is so he's got a couple of pictures of like this is kind of a Mediterranean diet. See like hummus and eggplant and olives, a little bit of meat, grape leaves, nuts, that kind of stuff. This is Asian diet, so greens, a little bit of fish, and salads, tofu, soup, rice, and then I believe this is an African diet. So greens, beans, rice, a little bit of poultry maybe, and some yams and things like that. Okay, so here he talked a little bit about meat and dairy alternatives. So probably they're better than a traditional meat in term for your health. Not much better, but a little bit better. They are better for the environment. They have less of a environmental footprint, but they're far inferior to whole plant food based dietary options. Then this is the environmental effects per serving of food produced. So the green is greenhouse gases and the yellow is land use. If you look at red meat, they produce the most greenhouse gases and they use the most land, then pork, then chicken, then fish obviously uses no land because they're in the ocean, but they do require quite a bit of greenhouse gases to harvest them, and then dairy, then eggs. So you see, like, this is where all it is. If you look at all of this stuff, there's essentially, compared to this, almost no greenhouse gases and no land use. And how can that be? Because these things are all grown on land. Well, the issue is like America grows a ton of soybeans and corn, and about less than 10% of that is eaten by people. 90% of that goes to feed chicken and pigs and beef, and basically the conversion rate to meat is very low. So you have to feed a cow like hundreds of pounds of corn to make a few pounds of meat. So it's very land use intensive. And I think, yeah. So here's the takeaways. Dietary pattern that emphasizes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and primarily plant sources of proteins and fats, and little to no sugar-sweetened beverages and processed meat will have major health benefits. This dietary plan also enables us to pass on a healthy planet. So these things are healthy for the planet, is eating these things, because they take the least amount of resources. Um, Making this dietary plan delicious and aspirational will be a key to success. Okay, so you need to make this diet palatable for people so that they want to eat it. And if you look at this, it looks amazing. Some yams, some dragon fruit, sprouts, yeah, tofu, sweet potatoes, looks delicious. Okay, so the good news is that a diet that's high in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and plant sources of protein is good for us, and it's good for the planet. So that's probably the diet that we need to try to move toward as a people. And but we do need to make it delicious and something that people want to eat.